I know exactly how you feel right now. You're sitting there, maybe with your coffee or tea, and you've been studying English for months or even years. You understand almost everything you read. You can follow movies and shows. But when it comes to speaking, something just feels off, right? You know that feeling when you're in a conversation and you're translating everything in your head first? When you pause for just a second too long because you're thinking in your native language and then trying to convert it to English? I see you, and I completely understand what you're going through. Today, we're going to talk about something that will change everything for you. We're diving deep into why thinking in English is the absolute key to sounding natural and confident in every single conversation you have. And I mean every conversation, from ordering coffee to having deep discussions with native speakers. But here's what I need from you right now. If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt stuck between knowing English and actually flowing in English, hit that like button. It tells me you're ready for this transformation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because we're building a community of English learners who refuse to stay in that frustrating middle ground. I'm going to share with you the exact mental shift that took me from stumbling through conversations to speaking with the confidence of someone who thinks in English. And trust me, once you understand this, you'll never go back to translating in your head again. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's unlock the secret that will make you sound like the fluent English speaker you already are inside. You know, I want you to think about something with me for a moment. Remember when you were a child and you first learned to ride a bike? At first, you had to think about every single movement. Where to put your hands, how to balance, when to pedal. But then one day, something magical happened. You just rode. You stopped thinking about the mechanics and your body just knew what to do. That's exactly what happens when you start thinking in English instead of translating. Right now, you're like someone trying to ride a bike while consciously thinking about every single movement. It works, but it's exhausting and it doesn't feel natural. I completely understand why you're still translating in your head. It feels safe, doesn't it? Your brain is trying to help you by using the language you know best as a bridge. But here's what I discovered, and what I want you to understand, that bridge is actually holding you back from true fluency. When you think in your native language first, you're forcing your brain to do double work. You're taking a thought, putting it into your native language structure, and then trying to convert that structure into English. But here's the problem, and this is something that might surprise you. Languages don't always translate directly. Every language has its own rhythm, its own way of expressing emotions, its own shortcuts and expressions. When you translate, you're trying to fit your native language's rhythm into English words, and that's why it sounds forced or unnatural. Think about this with me. When you're really excited about something in your native language, you have a certain way of expressing that excitement, right? But when you translate that exact feeling into English, it might sound too formal or too dramatic or just off. That's because you're trying to use English words to express a thought that was born in a different language structure. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something I'll explain more in detail later. There's a specific moment that happens in every fluent speaker's journey where their brain makes a switch. It's almost like flipping a mental switch where thoughts start forming directly in English instead of being translated. But I know what you might be thinking right now. You might be saying to yourself, but how can I think in English when I don't know all the words yet? Or, what if I make mistakes when I'm thinking? And I get it. I really do. You've been conditioned to believe that you need to be perfect, that every sentence needs to be grammatically correct, that you need to know every single word before you can start thinking in English. But that's not how language works in real life. When native speakers think, they don't think in perfect grammar. They think in feelings, in images, in simple concepts. They think I'm hungry, not I am experiencing the physiological sensation of hunger and require sustenance. They think that's crazy, not that situation is quite extraordinary and surprising. Here's what I want you to understand, and this is crucial. Thinking in English isn't about knowing more words or better grammar. It's about giving yourself permission to be simple, to be direct, to express your thoughts in the most basic way possible. I remember when this clicked for me personally. I was in a conversation with a native speaker, and I was struggling to explain a complex idea. I kept stopping, trying to find the perfect words, translating complex sentences from my native language. Then the person said something that changed everything for me. They said, "Just tell me simply. What do you mean?" And in that moment, I realized I was overcomplicating everything. I was trying to sound smart and sophisticated when all I needed to do was communicate my idea clearly and simply. That's when I discovered something that I'll share with you later in this episode. There's a specific technique that forces your brain to start thinking in English, and it's so simple that most people overlook it completely. But before I share that technique with you, I need you to understand something about your current mindset. Right now, you might be approaching English like it's a test you need to pass. Every conversation feels like an exam where you're being graded on your performance. I want you to shift that mindset completely. English isn't a test. It's a tool for connection. It's a way to share your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas with other people. When you think of it as a connection tool instead of a test, everything changes. Native speakers aren't sitting there judging your grammar. They're trying to understand your message. They want to connect with you. They're not counting your mistakes. They're listening to your ideas. And here's something that might blow your mind. Native speakers make mistakes too. They use wrong words sometimes. They start sentences and don't finish them. They say and repeat themselves. The difference is, they don't stop the flow of communication to fix every little mistake. This brings me to something really important that I need you to understand about confidence in English. Confidence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from flow. It comes from being able to express your thoughts without stopping to second-guess every word. But how do you develop that flow? How do you get your brain to stop translating and start thinking directly in English? That's exactly what we're going to explore together. And I promise you, by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear roadmap to make this transformation happen in your own mind. Let me share something with you that I think will really hit home. Picture this scenario. You're at a coffee shop and you want to order something simple. In your head, you might be thinking about how to say, "I would like a large coffee with milk and sugar, please," because that's the correct way you learned. But here's what a person thinking in English would actually think. Large coffee, milk, sugar. That's it. Simple, direct, clear. Then they might say, "Can I get a large coffee with milk and sugar?" But the thought process was much simpler than what you've been taught. You see, when you translate, you're trying to create perfect sentences in your head first. But when you think in English, you think in chunks, in pieces, in simple concepts that you then string together naturally as you speak. Let me give you another example that I know you can relate to. You're at work, and someone asks you about your weekend. If you're translating, you might think of a complete story in your native language first, then try to convert it word by word into English. That's exhausting, and it takes too long. But if you're thinking in English, your brain goes directly to simple English concepts. Weekend was good. Went to park. Met friends. Had fun. These thoughts come up naturally in English, and then you can expand them as you speak. My weekend was really good. I went to the park and met some friends. We had a lot of fun. Do you see the difference? The thinking process is happening in simple English chunks, not in translated complete sentences. Now, let me share with you what happens in real conversations when you start thinking in English. You know those moments when you're talking to someone and you suddenly can't find the right word. When you're translating, you stop completely. Your whole thought process breaks down because you're missing one piece of the translation puzzle. But when you think in English, you keep going. You find another way to say it. You use simpler words. You describe instead of defining. If you can't remember the word exhausted, you think very tired, and you keep talking. If you can't remember frustrated, you say angry and upset, and the conversation continues. This is exactly what native speakers do all the time. They can't remember a word, so they use other words. They don't stop talking. They don't apologize for not being perfect. They just keep communicating. Let me tell you about Sarah, one of our community members. She used to spend 5 minutes preparing what she wanted to say before making a phone call in English. She would write down her questions, practice her pronunciation, and still feel nervous during the call. Then she started practicing thinking in English for just 5 minutes every day. Not speaking, just thinking. When she walked to work, instead of thinking in her native language, she would think simple thoughts in English. Nice weather today. Need to buy groceries. Meeting at 2 o'clock. After just 2 weeks of this simple practice, she called me and said something amazing. She said, "I made a phone call today and I didn't prepare anything. The words just came out naturally." That's the power of training your brain to think in English. But here's where most people get stuck, and I bet this is happening to you too. You try to think in English, but you worry about making mistakes in your own head. You start thinking, "I am very hungry." And then you correct yourself. Wait, should it be "I am really hungry" or "I am so hungry"? And you end up back where you started, overthinking everything. I need you to understand something crucial here. When you're thinking in English, there are no mistakes. Your thoughts are private. No one is grading them. You can think, "Me hungry," if that's what comes up first. You can think, "Want food now." The goal is to get your brain comfortable with English thoughts, not perfect English thoughts. Here's a practical example of how this works in real situations. You're in a meeting and someone asks for your opinion. Instead of thinking, "What is my opinion about this topic and how should I express it properly in English?" you think "good idea" or "not sure about this" or "need more information." These simple English thoughts give you a starting point, and then you can build from there as you speak. The magic happens when you stop trying to impress people with complex sentences and start focusing on clear communication. I remember talking to David, another community member, who told me he used to try to use big words and complex grammar to sound professional. But people often looked confused, and he felt frustrated. Then he started thinking in simple English first. Instead of trying to say, "I believe we should implement a comprehensive strategy to optimize our productivity," he would think, "We need a better plan to work faster." Then he might say, "I think we need a better plan to be more productive." Simple, clear, and much more effective. But here's what's really exciting about this approach. The more you practice thinking in English, the more natural it becomes to express emotions and reactions directly in English too. When something surprises you, instead of thinking the surprise in your native language and then translating, "Oh my God," your brain starts to naturally think, "Wow," or "That's crazy," or "No way." This emotional connection to English is what makes the difference between sounding like you're reciting from a textbook and sounding like a real person having a real conversation. And here's something I'm going to reveal to you in our next section. There's a specific daily routine that can rewire your brain to default to English thinking in just 30 days. It's not about studying more or memorizing vocabulary. It's about changing the language your brain uses for your internal dialogue. Now, I want to address something that I know is probably going through your mind right now. You might be thinking, "This sounds great, but what if my English thinking is too simple? What if people think I'm not smart or educated?" I hear you, and I felt the exact same way. We've been taught that being fluent means using sophisticated vocabulary and complex sentence structures. But here's the truth that changed everything for me. The most powerful communication is often the simplest communication. Think about the most memorable conversations you've had in your native language. Were they memorable because of fancy words and complex grammar? Or were they memorable because of the genuine connection, the clear ideas, the authentic emotions? I bet it was the latter. When you start thinking in English, you're not dumbing down your intelligence. You're actually becoming more effective at communication. You're removing the barrier between your thoughts and your expression. You're becoming more authentic, more genuine, more you. Let me share something with you that might surprise you. I've worked with doctors, engineers, teachers, business executives, highly educated people who speak multiple languages. And you know what they all told me after they started thinking in English? They said they felt more confident, more relaxed, and more like themselves in English conversations. Why? Because they stopped performing and started communicating. They stopped trying to prove how smart they were and started focusing on sharing their ideas clearly. But I know there's another fear you might have, and it's one I struggled with too. What if you start thinking in simple English and you get stuck there? What if you never develop more sophisticated language skills? Here's what I discovered, and this is really important for you to understand. Thinking in English is not the end goal. It's the foundation. Once you build that foundation, once you get comfortable with English thoughts flowing naturally, then you can add complexity. But you can't build a house without a solid foundation first. When you're thinking in English naturally, learning new vocabulary becomes so much easier. Instead of trying to memorize translations, you start absorbing new words in context. When you hear someone say, "That's fascinating," and you're already thinking in English, your brain naturally connects "fascinating" with the feeling and situation, not with a translation from your native language. This is how children learn languages so effortlessly. They don't translate. They connect words directly with feelings, situations, and concepts. And that's exactly what you can do too, at any age. Now, let me tell you about the 30-day transformation I mentioned earlier. This isn't about studying for hours or doing complicated exercises. It's about making one simple change to your daily routine. For the next 30 days, I want you to change the language of your internal monologue. You know that voice in your head that comments on everything throughout the day? The one that says things like, "I'm tired," or "This traffic is terrible," or "I need to call mom." I want you to switch that voice to English. Start small. When you wake up, instead of thinking your first thoughts in your native language, think them in English. Time to get up. Need coffee. What's the weather today? Simple, basic English thoughts. As you go through your day, catch yourself thinking in your native language and gently switch to English. You're looking at your phone and thinking about a text message. Think your reaction in English. You're deciding what to have for lunch. Have that internal debate in English. I know this might feel weird at first. You might feel like you're pretending or acting. That's completely normal. Your brain is used to thinking in your native language. But here's what's amazing about our brains. They adapt incredibly quickly when we give them consistent practice. Within the first week, you'll notice something interesting. Those simple English thoughts will start coming more naturally. You won't have to force them as much. By the second week, you might catch yourself automatically thinking in English without even trying. But here's where it gets really exciting. By the third week, your English thoughts will start becoming more complex naturally. Instead of thinking, "Want coffee," you might naturally think, "I could really use a good cup of coffee right now." Your brain will start expanding your English thoughts organically. And by the fourth week, this is where the magic happens. You'll notice that when you speak English, the words flow more easily because your brain is already operating in English mode. There's no translation delay because your thoughts are already in English. But I want to prepare you for something that might happen during this process. And I don't want you to get discouraged when it does. There will be moments when you can't find the English words for what you want to think. Your brain will want to switch back to your native language because it's easier. When this happens, don't give up. Don't switch back. Instead, find simpler English words for your thought. If you can't think of how to say, "I'm overwhelmed," think, "I have too much to do," or "This is too much." If you can't remember procrastinating, think avoiding work or being lazy. This process of finding simpler ways to express complex thoughts is actually incredibly valuable. It's teaching your brain to be flexible with English. It's showing you that you don't need perfect vocabulary to express any idea clearly. And here's something beautiful that will happen as you continue this practice. You'll start to notice that your confidence in English conversations grows dramatically. Why? Because you're no longer translating on the spot. Your brain is already in English mode, so the conversation flows naturally. You'll also notice that you make fewer grammar mistakes when speaking. Not because you're thinking about grammar more, but because you're thinking about grammar less. When your thoughts are in English, the natural rhythm and structure of English starts to feel more intuitive. This brings me to the final piece of this transformation puzzle, something that will tie everything together and give you complete confidence in any English conversation. But first, let me ask you something. Are you ready to commit to this 30-day challenge? Because what I'm about to share with you in our conclusion will only work if you're willing to make this simple daily change. So, here we are, and I want you to take a deep breath with me. We've covered so much ground today, and I can feel your excitement about what's possible for you. Remember at the beginning when I asked you about that secret behind how children learn languages so effortlessly? Here it is. Children never translate. They think directly in the language they're learning. They connect words with feelings, situations, and concepts, not with translations. And that's exactly what you're going to do with your 30-day internal monologue challenge. Remember when I mentioned that specific moment when your brain makes a switch? That moment comes when you stop fighting your brain's natural desire to think simply and start embracing it. When you give yourself permission to think, me hungry, instead of forcing, I am experiencing hunger, you're actually training your brain to operate in English mode. And that technique I promised you that forces your brain to start thinking in English? It's this daily practice of changing your internal dialogue. It's simple, it's free, and it works because you're rewiring the language your brain defaults to for 16 hours every single day. Here's what I need you to do right now. First, commit to this 30-day challenge. Starting tomorrow morning, switch your internal monologue to English. Keep it simple, be patient with yourself, and trust the process. Second, I want you to share this episode with someone who's on the same English journey as you. Because when you teach something, you learn it twice. When you share this concept, you're reinforcing it in your own mind. And finally, come back and tell us about your experience. Leave a comment about how this 30-day challenge changes your English confidence. Hit that subscribe button because we're building a community of English thinkers, not English translators. You've got this. Your fluent, confident, natural English-speaking self is just 30 days of simple thinking away. Start today, start now, and watch everything change.